The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasy. You can up to 325 times your entry with the new Pick 8s on the promo code SGPN. Claim a special Pick any first deposit offer up to $2 in bonus cash. Onyx Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get the best data-driven props and also build your own betting model using their AI betting engine. Claim your 7-day free trial by going to sportsgamepodcast.com. So it's Rhythm, sportsgamepodcast.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Monday night on July 8th, roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to get into the quarterfinals at Wimbledon. On the men's side, we're going to preview all 4 matches there. We were going through most of the matches per round, and now we're officially at the point where there's enough matches to actually cover all of them in depth. So we are going to go with all 4 matches to preview for this one. Before we get into any of the actual breakdown of these matches, do want to remind me once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, reminder, don't forget to rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Saw we were closing in on around 300 subscribers. I think we're about 9 away. So if you could help out with that, I'd appreciate it. Point is also, don't forget to comment. And don't forget to rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple if you are still watching the podcast or listening to the podcast that way. Reviews go a long way. We haven't gotten many reviews lately. Did see one about a week ago or so. So appreciate the review, but we kind of need a few more. So don't be shy. Let your feedback be known. And also a reminder, don't forget to check out the SGPN merch store for Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, we have sweatshirts, and we have mugs, not just for the tennis show as well, but, by the way, but we also have other podcasts, including the MLB show, which I'm on. So if you do want to get yourself some form of merchandise for any of the shows that we have on the network, that's definitely appreciated. And also a reminder, before I forget, that we do have the featured shows for the week, which is the Propcast. Munaf, Machine Manji, and Chris are going to get you ready for the NFL season on the Propcast. They have episodes dedicated to season-long props and the awards markets for the NFL season. I edit that show, so they usually have an episode during the offseason once a week. So check that show out. Also a reminder, don't forget to check out CJ Sullivan and his road to $10 million on Bottom Line Bombs. Tune into these shows wherever you do get your podcast or on the SGPN app. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of the last episode. Unfortunately for the lock and dog picks, overall not good. For the actual matches, though, I think we had an okay round. We just picked the wrong place for the actual picks. Starting off with the lock, we beat a massive line move and it didn't matter. We had the over 39.5 games in the Musetti and Pericard match at minus 138. Match closed at around 43.5 or 44.5. So we beat a massive line move, and it didn't matter. Pericard ended up just falling apart serving-wise. Musetti looked great, and Musetti did win in 4 sets. So we're right about each player winning a set. The problem was we were going to look into, once again, multiple breakers. That's kind of the argument that we had. We thought we were going to end up getting a couple of tie breaks, and that didn't happen. We had 0, actually, which is kind of shocking. Musetti only got broken 1 time in the entire match, so he did his part. Unfortunately, though, Pericard only had 10 aces. After winning the first set, it just seemed like he was exhausted, and Pericard just struggled serving-wise, and we said he broke him a bunch. I think he broke him 5 times, if I'm not mistaken. So the point is, ended up not getting there. Beat a line move, and we lost, so what are you going to do? But either way, picked up a loss there. For the dog, a very annoying loss. So we had 2 annoying losses, not bad beats per se, but just annoying for different reasons. The lock was annoying because we beat a line move and it lost anyway. The dog was annoying because we ended up having the under half a tie break in the Paul match, and it was a straight sets win. And 2 of the 3 sets had less than 9 games. Paul ended up dominating in 2 of the 3 sets. The problem was the set in the middle went 7-6. So that ended up resulting in a loser for us. I was right, though, about neither guy really holding on a regular basis, especially Agut. Paul did his part, but Agut ended up breaking early in that second set. Paul broke back, and then at that point, you had a hold fest. But it's pretty annoying when you get a straight sets win with 2 lopsided sets, but the only set that is not is a tie break. So that's how we ended up losing. Still like the value at 125. Thought Paul would end up winning in 3 or 4, and I thought there'd be a lot of breaks. There were, unfortunately, not enough in the second set, which is why we ended up losing. So once again, not a great episode for the lock and dog picks. See a question in the comment section of if I do a women's preview or not. I don't do women's for the quarterfinals. I will do it for the semis, which is actually going to be the next episode. But I was going to get to that at the end. Next episode will be the women's semifinal episode. So keep that in mind. But for the actual quarters, I'm not doing the women's side. I'm only doing the men's. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of the matches. Covered a couple of them a second ago. You had Alcaraz who beat Humbert in 4. That one, for example, with the over 3.5 on, and that got there, as Humbert looked really good for the third set and for parts of the fourth. The issue is Humbert just could not hold consistently enough, and Alcaraz was able to break enough in order to get the job done, as he won in 4 sets. Thought Sinner would win in straight sets against Shelton, which he did. Definitely a fun tiebreak in the third set. Shelton had a couple set points, could not convert, and Sinner got the job done as he won in straight sets. I think that was minus 145, but those two matches kind of sum up how the round was for us. Where the round was fine, the issue was for the lock and dog picks once again. I just picked the wrong plays. But either way, for the third match, you had Medvedev beating Dimitrov in 8 games because Dimitrov got injured and ended up retiring. Thought Medvedev was mispriced. Unfortunately, though, for the money line bets, those got voided. You have to complete one full set, according to most books. They did not, as Dimitrov ended up retiring, as Medvedev was 1 game away from making the bet official. And we saw Paul beat Agut in straight sets, like the under in that matchup. Thought Paul would win comfortably. He did, but once again, there was a breaker in there, which ruined our actual dog pick. So not much drama on Sunday. You had a 4-set match between Alcaraz and Humbert, and that was basically it, because the other 2 matches ended in straight sets, and the Medvedev match ended after 8 games. So kind of an underwhelming overall card on Sunday. And for Monday, definitely a better card, as 3 of the 4 matches went to at least 4 sets. You saw Musetti beat Perricard in the morning match in 4 sets, came back from a set down. Once again, Perricard just did not serve well. Seemed like he was exhausted. Makes sense because he ended up making a surprisingly deep run in the main draw, and he went through qualifying, so a lot of tennis for him. But the point is he ended up losing after getting broken 5 times, and you ended up seeing him win 67% of the first serve points, 53% of the second serve points. Musetti won 79% of the first serve points and 84% of the second serve points. The main issue that Perricard has, he's a horrible returner, objectively, and I feel like that's going to be an area that needs to improve on. Point is, though, Perricard ended up losing in 4, but I ended up giving out a parlay in the SGPN Discord, so I recommend you joining that. Free to enter. We have a tennis server, and I gave out a 2-pick parlay, which was an over 3.5 sets parlay in the Musetti and the Fritz matches, and that worked out. So once again, did end up having a winner of some kind available on the Discord for free. The point is, Musetti got there 1-4, won comfortably after the first set. De Minaur ended up beating Fees in 4. That one we got right. We thought Fees was actually alive to make it interesting, and we were right with the over 3.5 sets. We thought that Fees was a massive dog, thought the price should have been a bit closer, and Fees did his part. He forced a 4th set after losing the first 2, but unfortunately he ran out of gas, and De Minaur may or may not have gotten injured on that last point, as he ended up winning, but not celebrating his match point success, as he ended up kind of tweaking something as he reached for a volley. So keep an eye out for him, but the lack of, I'd say, solid emotion is probably or positive emotion is a concern, because after making the quarterfinals of Wimbledon, you'd assume he'd look pretty happy, look at his camp, and be thrilled. He'd have like a fist pump in there, but no, he looked like he had just lost the match. Just looking at his overall body language and his overall facial expressions. De Minaur's hurt. I don't know how hurt, but I have to at least mention it. It did not look good, and his immediate reaction post-match definitely leaves some concern to be had for fans and for potential bettors if they are looking to bet on De Minaur against Djokovic in the quarterfinals. The best match, though, of the round was easily the Fritz and Zverev match. We like the over in that one. Thought Zverev would win, but Fritz did a good job coming back from 2 sets down. Zverev seemed a bit injured, was not moving well. I believe his knee was bothering him. Zverev, though, served very well in the first 2 sets. Fritz served well, too, but unfortunately for Fritz, he did end up losing the second set via breaker, but he turned it around as he was able to break late in the third set, and then was able to coast. I can't really say coast. They went to a tiebreak into the fourth, but Fritz ended up opening up a massive lead in the tiebreak. He won the breaker, then he ended up breaking early in the 5th set as he completed the 2-0 comeback. Fritz, though, served very well, and Zverev, with the compromised movement, did not really return well at all. Fritz got broken in the first set. That was the only time he got broken. So Zverev had 0 breaks in the final 4 sets combined, and Fritz was able to apply constant pressure to Zverev's service games down the stretch, and it just seemed like eventually Zverev ended up blinking in these moments. For example, in that third set, we saw Zverev double fault on break point. So it just seemed like Fritz was a little bit too consistent and his serve was too solid. And Zverev, I still think, could have potentially beaten him if he was fully healthy. But you can tell the knee was bothering him. And you could tell that Zverev was not really moving laterally well enough to actually get the job done. And Fritz was able to come back and complete the upset victory. So nice win for Fritz as he got the job done. Either way, though, point is looking at the last match, you saw Djokovic, and that was probably the most underwhelming match of the actual quarter because Agut getting his ass kicked was expected. I mean, we know how old he is. He had to play a set and a half against Fognini the day before. We thought Paul was going to bury him for the most part. For Djokovic, I thought Rune was going to have a really fun match against him, just based on the head-to-head history. I know that it was on grass, and Djokovic excels on grass. Rune not so much. But historically speaking, none of their matches previously had ended in straight sets, and I thought that Rune would do enough to get at least one set in. We saw Djokovic drop a set to Papiron. We saw him drop a set to Fernley. I just thought Rune would hang in there, and he did not. Djokovic kicked his ass. Djokovic buried him. Rune only won, I believe it was, he won 9 games in the entire match. 9 games. Definitely not the match I thought we were going to get. I didn't mind the over in that match. Thought both players would win a set, but either way, point is that did not happen. Joker showed up, won the first 12 points of the match, and at that point, it was over. Djokovic dominated a vintage Djokovic performance, which is a good sign for him and a bad sign for the rest of the competition because the guy who came off of a knee injury faced off against a top 10 guy in the world in the Wimbledon round of 16, and he dominated. So Djokovic looked phenomenal. Best match he's played in the event, besides maybe the first round, but Capriva's not any good. So definitely, based on context, the best match that he's played in this event. Rune, we know, can be a head case at times, and Cayetano's mentioning it. It was an ass-kicking. I didn't mind the plus 245. I mean, I thought Djokovic would win. I didn't go that far because I just thought eventually he would be able to just be stable enough to overcome Rune's ups and downs. But yeah, Rune was up and down all over the match, and he got discouraged quickly, and Djokovic was just too solid, is what it is. Now, there was some drama that happened with regard to the post-match with Djokovic in his interview. Not going to spend too much time on it, but I do at least want to bring it up. Djokovic was pissed at the actual match crowd for a lot of booing and a lot of support for Rune. Now, this is not the first time Djokovic has complained about the crowd, not just in Wimbledon, but in general. And there are a couple ways to go about it. Not going to spend too much time on it, but I want to at least mention it. Do I understand where Djokovic is coming from, that the crowd support is usually not as strongly in his favor as it probably should be compared to other all-time great tennis players? I understand it. Now, do I think he should be getting more support? At the end of the day, maybe. That's up to the fans. If the fans like him, then sure. If they don't, then that's up to them. The fans don't have to root for Djokovic if they don't want to. And Djokovic has been a bit of a polarizing figure over the years, but it's mostly based on what I think is the Nadal-Federer rivalry. I'm not going to go too far back into it, but it seemed like people kind of chose sides back then between Federer and Nadal when they were starting their dominance on the tour. And it seemed like everybody kind of turned into Federer fans or Nadal fans just based on how often they would dominate respective tournaments. It was kind of a two-horse race in men's tennis for, 4 or 5 years, give or take. I just feels like the fans of tennis and the sport itself gravitated towards those two guys for being the best players in the world by a wide margin. Then Djokovic shows up, who's a relative unknown Serbian guy, and he's known originally for his impressions. You might remember that he impersonated Sharapova and a couple other players, and he had himself kind of a shtick where he would do impersonations of players, and he also had some injury issues early in his career, or I should say some withdrawal issues, where he was constantly retiring mid-matches, and it just seemed like a lot of people weren't exactly taking him that seriously. Then Djokovic changed his diet around, and he ended up becoming the best player of all time. But it just seemed like the fan base always kind of dismissed Djokovic because they were so focused on Federer and Nadal that Djokovic was always going to be the third guy. And then Djokovic started dominating, and he ended up winning all these Grand Slams in the early 2010s onward. And the fan bases, though, were already so committed to Federer and Nadal, they never really became super fans of Djokovic. So it seems like, at least from what I've experienced, a lot of fans chose Federer and Nadal over him, and that's why Djokovic never got the same warmth from the fan bases as Federer and Nadal did. Not to mention the fact, if you want to talk about stylistically, Federer is viewed as having the most aesthetically pleasing game of all time, just based on his fluidity and his overall variety that he had when he played. Nadal was known as being the nonstop overall energy guy who would run around and he'd pull off some crazy shots. Djokovic is the model of consistency in tennis. He has probably the most rock solid backhand of all time, just overall solid strokes. You could argue that his game can be boring to some. So some people might have found Djokovic boring over the years, at least watching him play compared to Federer and Nadal, and that might be why they haven't exactly rooted for him the same way. The problem that I have with Djokovic complaining is that Djokovic has turned the crowd rooting against him as a motivational tool mid-match for a decade and change. And he will use the crowd rooting against him as a type of motivation that helps him get through a couple of matches, and that has definitely worked out for him in the past. My point is you can't really have it both ways. Djokovic can't really complain about the crowd not supporting him when he constantly uses the crowd again being against him as a source of motivation and a source of energy to propel him to win matches. So it kind of contradicts itself, and I understand if Djokovic is actually bothered by it because Nadal is about to retire. Federer's been retired for years, and Djokovic is still bothered by crowds not automatically supporting him because those two's careers are basically over at this point. At the end of the day, you can't force the crowd to root for you. If the crowd gets tired of you winning all the time, or the crowd doesn't find you entertaining, not even mentioning the COVID stuff, because I know that he lost some fans when that whole fiasco happened a couple of years ago. At the end of the day, I'm not going to agree with Djokovic here. Should he get more of a, I'd say, of a applause based on being the best player of all time? In theory, sure. I'm not going to get mad at the crowd for not wanting to cheer for him. It's up to the crowd. If the crowd wants to cheer for him, they can. If they don't have to. I mean, you can do whatever you want when you're in the stands within reason, but it just feels like Djokovic is being a little bit, I'd say, I can't really think of the right word, but he's being a little bit of a nagger in this one. He just seems to be complaining for the sake of complaining. I don't believe the fans are going to cheer for you more if you get mad vocally in the press and say the crowd should support you more. I'm not into that personally, even though Djokovic is my favorite player. I'm a big Djokovic fan. I'm not a fan of the way that he complained about the crowd. If the crowd wants to cheer for you, they'll cheer for you. If they don't, they're not going to. That's kind of how it goes. It's kind of like Gladiator. You got to win the crowd. And Djokovic over the years has not really won the crowd over. And I do think the crowd is not forced to cheer for him if they don't want to. That's kind of how I look at it. Cayetano's calling him a punk. It's kind of, yeah, you can make the argument. I mean, people have been critical of Djokovic's personality over the years. I don't really care that much about personality. If you win matches. And as far as I'm concerned, Djokovic is the best player of all time. But I'm not going to feel bad for Djokovic that fans would rather root against him than root for him. It doesn't really matter to me. Djokovic can win the tournament, and that's how he's going to make himself happy. So either way, wanted to mention that. Nothing really else to mention for the actual fourth round. I could dive into Djokovic's comments about tennis compared to pickleball, which I thought was actually pretty fascinating in the press conference a couple days ago. Think I'm going to save that for another episode. Feel like there's no real point in talking about it now. It was kind of evergreen content, so I'll go through that at some other point. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the fourth round. Not much drama. Monday was definitely better than Sunday, but hopefully the matches are even better on a Tuesday and Wednesday. Anyway, before we get into any of the actual quarterfinal match previews, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy because the pick 8 is alive. Great entries up to 8 picks, and Underdog will automatically double flex your entries. So you have 2 picks and still win your entry. With more picks to make and extra ways to win, the excitement's higher than ever. The best part, you now win up to 325 times the original amount. You can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries. I say it every episode. For my pick 8 entries, you can use WNBA plays. I'm obviously going to use Angel Reese rebounds. She set the all-time record for the longest consecutive streak of games with double-doubles. She set the all-time single-season record for double-doubles. She is a rebounding machine. Give me the higher on her rebounds basically every game. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick any first-time deposit offer up to $200 bonus cash on a fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Circa Survivor and Circa Millions. Circa Sports is back with Circa Survivor and Circa Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. A reminder, the contests have no rake. Circa Millions, pick 5 NFL teams ATS each week and compete for $6 million or survive the NFL Goal and NFL Survivor to claim the $10 million prize. Sign up in person at Circa Sports between now and September 7th and use a proxy to play from anywhere. We even have a deal with footballcontestproxy.com to save you $50 with the promo code SGP. Don't have a trip booked yet for Las Vegas before football. Ultimate Contest weekend is a great time to go hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events at the greatest sportsbook in the world from August 22nd through the 24th. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the 4th round. Now it's time to get into the actual matches for Tuesday and for Wednesday. Starting off with the first match on the card. Should be a fun one. So for the first match that's actually scheduled, it is the Sinner versus Medvedev match, which is honestly a treat. The fact that the two matches on Tuesday, by the way, are fantastic. So you have Sinner against Medvedev. Medvedev's obviously a big favorite, about minus 450. Medvedev is plus 360. Over-unders around 37.5, 38.5. For the game spread, Sinner's minus 5. Medvedev is plus 5. You can even find some smaller numbers. I see some 4.5s if you want to go for the spread there for Sinner instead. Bit more juicy, but you get the point. For the actual set spread, Sinner minus 1.5 sets is a minus 180. Medvedev plus 1.5 sets is plus 150. The over 3.5 sets is minus 160. The under is around plus 130. Shop around, though. You can find better prices. Now, Sinner and Medvedev have had a very interesting head-to-head history because you might remember Medvedev owned Sinner over the first couple of years. Medvedev was 6-0 lifetime against Sinner. Won the first 6 meetings. Then Sinner decided, you know what, I'm going to stop losing to this guy, and Sinner's won 5 straight. So Sinner completely flipped the script starting in Beijing last year in the final. Sinner won that one in Vienna, won in the ATP finals, won in the Australian Open final, and then ended up winning in Miami. So Sinner won 5 straight. So the argument is Sinner has solved the Medvedev puzzle, and that might explain why he's this big of a favorite. Having said that, it's a rinse and repeat broken clock argument by me, but I got to say it again. These odds makers really hate Medvedev because I find these odds pretty fascinating. I think Sinner's actually too expensive, or I should say too big of a favorite in this matchup. I think he should be favored. 450 is a bit wild. I find it interesting that Alcaraz is minus 360 and Sinner's minus 450 when Sinner's facing off against a top 5 player in the world and Alcaraz facing off against Tommy Paul. Now, Tommy Paul's been in great form. I'm aware of the context behind it. I'll get into that match in a second. Minus 450? That feels massive to me. I mean, Sinner dropped sets early in the event. Then he almost dropped a set against Shelton in the last round. Medvedev's been objectively good. Medvedev hasn't really done anything wrong. The biggest concern that he had was having a competitive 4-set match against Mueller. But once again, Sinner dropped sets early in the tournament to Hanfmann and to Berrettini. So Medvedev has actually dropped the same amount of sets. He dropped the same amount of sets that Sinner did, and he dropped a set to Mueller and he dropped a set to Struff. But he looked good against Dimitrov before Dimitrov got injured. Looked good against Struff, 1 in 4 sets there. I think Sinner's going to win, but minus 450, really? I feel like Medvedev can actually pull this off. Am I picking him to win the match? No. I think Sinner's going to win. I like the over. 3.5 sets of minus 160. Yeah, that looks like a good price to me. I think Sinner can win this match in 4 or 5. I think Medvedev is a very underrated grass player. I've said it time and time again. These odds feel extremely off to me. I think Sinner should be a smaller favorite against Medvedev than Alcaraz is against Paul personally, just based on the overall talent level of all 4 guys. I think it should be closer to minus 350, maybe minus 300. But it seems that the odds makers the last couple rounds have just hated on Medvedev, and I don't agree with it. I just think at the end of the day that these odds are a bit off. Once again, I think Sinner is going to win. I'm not picking Medvedev to pull off the upset. I'm just saying if this ended up going 4 or 5 sets, I would not be shocked by it. And I think minus 160 is a very cheap price for over 3.5 sets. I think this price should, in my opinion, be around like minus 180, minus 190. But the fact that the head-to-head, yes, it's been lopsided over the last year or so in favor of Sinner. It's still 6-5 in favor of Medvedev if you want to go for the long-term head-to-head. Faced off in the Australian Open final this year, went to 5 sets. Faced off in the ATP finals last year, went to a deciding set. Faced off in Vienna last year, went to a deciding set. So 3 of the last 4 meetings were not decided in straight sets. And straight sets is once again, a pretty absurd price for me. I think that the over 3.5 sets has value. I think if you want to go for a fun play, you can go with Sinner to win and both players to win a set. I think that market's appealing, and that would be plus money. I see Ryan mentioning the games makes sense at 38.5 at minus 112. If you do like a tie break in the match, then I agree. I think a tie break and you probably cruise over. The issue that you run into is if you end up getting something like the Paracard match where you go 4 sets, but you have no breakers and you fly under anyway. But I do think, based on how good these guys are at serving, a breaker somewhat likely. I agree with the games. I like the over there. If you want to go for the over 3.5 sets, though, I think he can win at least one set. That's kind of my point. I think Sinner's going to win. I want to quickly see what the actual price is for Sinner to win with both players to win a set. I just want to quickly see if I could find it. Let me just pull up the market for a second. Sorry, just need to pull that up for a second. But while I do that, point is, I think that's my main angle for the actual match. Give me a fun match that I think is going to be more competitive than people want to at least imagine it's going to be. But I think Sinner wins. Sinner was one of my picks pre-tournament. I think he has too much firepower for Medvedev to handle. And I think Medvedev at some point is going to double fault the breakaway, and I think that's going to hurt him. But if you want to go for value, it's been a solid prop for us all tournament long. Sinner to win and both players to win a set is plus 126. I like that a lot. So that's going to be my main lean for plus money in that one. Moving on to the next matchup. Spent a lot of time on that one. Apologies, but I feel like that match I should spend a lot of time on because you have two top 5 guys in the world against each other in the first quarterfinal match. That's a hell of a matchup for the quarterfinals. Moving on, you have Paul taking on Alcaraz. Alcaraz is minus 360. Paul is plus 290. For the game spread, you have minus 5 for Alcaraz. You have plus 5 for Paul. The over-under in games is around 38 or 39.5. For the set spread, you have Alcaraz minus 1.5 sets at minus 160. You have Paul plus 1.5 sets at plus 130. Alcaraz in straight sets is around plus 180. Paul to win a set is minus 220. The over 3.5 sets is minus 175. Shop around, though, I did see another minus 160 if you want to go for that market. Now, this one, I understand why the line is looking a little bit cheap on Alcaraz at minus 360, at least based on the ranking. The reason why is because, A, Alcaraz not looked that great the last couple rounds, dropped a set to Humbert and dropped 2 sets to Tiafoe. However, the main reason is because of the fact that Alcaraz and Paul have had a couple of wars against each other over the years, and Paul's actually done very well against Alcaraz over the last couple of years. So a reminder of the head-to-head meetings, they're tied 2-2, which might surprise some. Faced off in Montreal in 2022, Paul won that one in 3 sets. Faced off in Miami, Alcaraz won in straight sets. Faced off in Toronto last year, Paul won in 3. And they faced off in Cincinnati last year, Alcaraz won in 3. They also had an exhibition match, which I don't remember where that was located. I want to say Mexico, but I'm not sure if it actually was in Mexico. Alcaraz won that one in straight sets, but they had an exhibition match, which is not included. I'm not going to count it either. Point is, though, 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings had 3 sets, or I should say went to a deciding set. And I think with that being the case, it makes sense to expect Paul to keep this match competitive. Now, do I think Alcaraz is going to win? Yes. Would I be shocked if Alcaraz lost? Not as shocked as others would be, but I would be shocked. I think Alcaraz is the better player. And Paul has been playing great tennis. He won a 500 event. He has been getting better as the event's gone on. Dropped a set to Martinez early in the event. Dropped 2 sets to Virtanen. He's been great ever since. Killed Bublik, killed Agut, so I think that he's in good form. But I do think that Alcaraz is going to win because I think that his upside in terms of talent is obviously better than Paul. However, the fact that Paul's been this good lately and the fact that Alcaraz consistently drops sets, I think this can go 4 or 5. I'm not going to totally dismiss Paul and tell you Alcaraz is going to kill him. Based on the head-to-head and based on the current form, I think Paul has been good enough to win at least one set in this matchup. If Alcaraz is going to lose a set, or at least one set to Tiafoe, and at least one set to Humbert, I don't know why Paul couldn't win a set either. So I like the over in this matchup. I think a breaker could be in the cards here. Paul's been serving well, especially based on his own standards. But if you want to go for the same angle that I mentioned for the Sinner match, Alcaraz to win and both players to win a set is plus 145. Plus 145, I think, is a great deal. I understand that Paul, in theory, could pull off the upset. I think most people are expecting Alcaraz to win the match relatively comfortably. I think that middle ground is a very solid value play. If you want to go for plus 145, Alcaraz finding a way to find his best form, kind of like the Tiafoe match where he's down on the ropes and then the tiebreak comes around and he raises his level to another gear, and Tiafoe had no chance at that point. I can see that happening in this match too, where Alcaraz is down, raises the level, and does enough to win. But I do think Paul can hang in there, and I think the over is a pretty solid play here at 38 games at minus 125. Give me a marathon. I think a breaker could be in the cards here based on the head-to-head as well. But similar to the Sinner breakdown, I am going with the favorite. I am going to pick Sinner versus Alcaraz in the semifinals. But I do think the over is definitely, I should say, intriguing. And I do think that the favorite to win with both players to win a set in both matches of plus money is the attractive market here. So give me Alcaraz to win this match with both players to win a set, and that can be found on Caesars at plus 145. Ryan asking me of my thoughts for the first set. To be honest, I have a hard time fully backing first set stuff unless there's a common trend to be found there. I don't see much of a trend there. Alcaraz has been pretty good in the first set of matches. Alcaraz has kind of stumbled more in the I'm trying to think of, I think the third set's been a problem for him recently, but I don't see much of an edge in the first set. If you want to take a flyer on Paul, I don't hate it, but I don't really have much of an angle for it. The reason why I mentioned first set plays is, for example, Bublik, who just constantly punts first sets. I need an angle to actually run with, and I didn't see an angle for the first set for those guys. But I think for the sake of this matchup, give me a war. But I think I am going to go with Alcaraz to win in probably 4 or 5 sets. That's going to do it for the actual matches on Tuesday. Now it's time for the matches on Wednesday, which are significantly worse. Full disclosure. It's the first match on Wednesday. They haven't officially announced the schedule, but I'm assuming Musetti is going to be the first match because they'll save Djokovic for primetime. So for the first match, you have Musetti taking on Fritz. Fritz is around minus 330. Musetti's around plus 275. For the game spread, you have minus 4.5 for Fritz. You have plus 4.5 for Musetti. The over-under is around 39.5. For the actual set wagering, Fritz in straight sets you can find at plus 170. You can find Fritz minus 1.5 sets at minus 160. The over 3.5 sets is minus 165. The under is plus 135. Now, they faced off 3 times in their careers. Musetti did win the most recent meeting. That was on clay, though. Faced off on grass, though, in Wimbledon a couple of years ago, and Fritz buried him. Fritz won in straight sets. Now, do I think Fritz is a worthy favorite of around minus 330? Yes. I believe when I originally saw both them win, I thought Fritz would be like minus 375, and I think that FanDuel has around 360. So I was kind of on the same ballpark. Fritz has been great in the event. Came back against Zverev. Great win for him. He had been 0-2 against Zverev in Wimbledon in the past, but a very solid win against a top 5 player. And Fritz has a shot now, a very favorable draw to make his first ever Grand Slam semi. So, of course, we're rooting for him because we have him at plus 600 to win the quarter. So hopefully Fritz gets the job done for us in the outright market. But for this matchup, Musetti's been solid. He has had a favorable draw, but I feel like I've kind of been, I don't want to say overly critical of Musetti because I'm at least being honest. He has had a pretty favorable draw, but he keeps winning. I got to give him props for it. But this will definitely be the hardest opponent he's faced in this event. Beat Lestien, beat Darderi, beat Comensagna, and then he faced off against the lucky loser in the 4th round. Now, I know Perricard had been in great form. I'm not totally dismissing that actual fact that Perricard was in good form. A lucky loser, though, in the 4th round is a pretty favorable draw, on just without any bias at all. And now you have to go up against a top 10, top 15 guy in the world. It's definitely a step up in competition for Musetti. Now, as for Fritz, he had a pretty decent draw early in the event as well against O'Connell and against Rinderknech. Tabilo was in great form. He won in straight sets, and Zverev was in solid form as well. And Zverev, we know, has had a pretty good year. Made a deep run in the Australian Open before choking that lead against Medvedev. Lost in the final against Alcaraz in the French Open. The point is, Zverev's had a pretty decent year without the actual trophy in the Grand Slam to back it up. But that is still a very solid comeback. And I know Zverev was not at 100%. The point is, though, I think Fritz is going to win. I think that the Zverev match tested him, and I think that he passed with flying colors. The serve was great. He didn't get broken for 4 straight sets. I think his serve should look sharp against Musetti. What really impressed me, though, was the actual rally patience and rally tolerance of Fritz in that Zverev match. he really limited the unforced errors, and it just felt like Fritz was able to patiently wait out mistakes from Zverev, and I was very impressed by Fritz. I think Fritz has the rally capability to potentially outlast Musetti in a couple of these rallies. We know Musetti has the one-handed backhand. It can be erratic at times. I think Fritz is going to win, though, and I do think he'll get the job done in this one. If I had to guess, probably 4 sets, maybe. But Fritz really should win this one. He's a worthy favorite. I understand why he's priced this way. He beat him in straight sets in Wimbledon a couple years ago. Good enough for me. Give me Fritz to win. I'll give Musetti props, though. I'll give him a set. I'm not going to tell you that Fritz is going to bury him. If he did, I would not be shocked. But give me Fritz in 4, if I had to guess my actual prediction for this one. Moving on to the next matchup, you have De Minaur taking on Djokovic. Djokovic is around minus 290. De Minaur is around plus 245. For the game spread, Djokovic minus 5 is around minus 104. De Minaur plus 5 is minus 116. The over-under in games is 38.5. For the set spread, Djokovic minus 1.5 sets in this one is minus 140. De Minaur plus 1.5 sets is plus 110. The over 3.5 sets is minus 180. And the under 3.5 sets is plus 150. Now, for this matchup, originally, just watching the matches unfold, you'd argue De Minaur had a chance to make the match interesting. Now, Djokovic is up 2-1 lifetime. De Minaur did beat him, though, earlier this year. As you saw, Djokovic get injured in the United Cup, and you ended up seeing De Minaur beat him in straight sets. Now, De Minaur's been in great form. Won a grass title a couple weeks ago. He's been comfortable here in the Wimbledon. I believe the match against Fees was the first match that he's had in the event dropping a set. I think he had been clear because he had a bye in the third round since Puig dropped out. Beat Munar in straight sets and beat Duckworth in straight sets. Now, Fees he handled comfortably. Third set, I know, once again, he lost, but he was pretty comfortable for most of the match. So he looked very good. Now, the problem that I think throws a wrench into the entire initial prediction, some of you might have thought that De Minaur was alive during his match against Fees and waiting to see Djokovic against Rune. However, I just can't look past that match point. I think De Minaur is injured. I feel like his immediate reaction after hitting that volley, the lunging volley that he had on match point, it was not great body language. And if you're going to beat Djokovic after he dismantled Rune in the fourth round, you need to be 100%. And De Minaur's immediate reaction, his head down, no celebration at all, no turning to his actual coaching staff, no turning to his girlfriend who was in the stands to celebrate, it has me concerned. I think De Minaur is actually injured, and I feel like there is good reason to be concerned about his overall health for this matchup. So based on that, I kind of pulled the 180 here. I thought De Minaur was going to make the match competitive. I thought he'd maybe win a set. To be honest, I'm not sure he's going to finish the match. I'm that concerned about his injury. Now, maybe I'm overreacting, and maybe De Minaur comes out with a day off and is able to compete with Djokovic. To be honest, I don't see it. I just think De Minaur is actually injured, and the body language, I'm not trying to be a body language doctor, but I kind of am. I think he's in trouble. And I think a retirement mid-match might actually be on the cards here. So I'm going Djokovic. The problem is trying to find value because most markets would void if De Minaur retires mid-match. So maybe you can go Djokovic first set spread if you want to go for that angle. But I think Djokovic wins probably comfortably. I'm seriously concerned about De Minaur's overall health. And Cayetano, I did the same thing. For the actual quarter, I did go against Djokovic. I just didn't see much value on a guy with knee issues. And I ended up leaning to De Minaur and to Hurkacz. That didn't work out. At least Hurkacz did not. But Djokovic, I think, is in a very good spot. And I think that he got pretty fortunate that the draw unfolded with an injury on match point to advance to the next round. I think Djokovic is going to win, and I think a retirement might actually be on the cards. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a very underwhelming match. I think it might not end. I think it might end prematurely. I think it might not actually go the desired length, and I think it might turn into a Medvedev-Dimitrov match where it's over pretty quickly. Maybe I'm overreacting to it, maybe I'm not, but if De Minaur is below 100%, based on how Djokovic played in the match against Rune, he's in trouble anyway. So give me Djokovic in what I think is going to be a pretty underwhelming matchup to wrap up the quarterfinals. Anyway, time to move on to the actual lock and dog picks. Before we continue that, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm. Because Rhythm is a great place to help you with their player props because it's the go-to sports betting tool that transports complex data into actual insights, empowering bettors with smarter, data-driven decisions. Unlike other platforms, Rhythm combines advanced predictive analytics with an intuitive user experience, making betting both easier and more enjoyable. The predictive model was born from the brains of MIT data scientists and quants with 3 years of data to help drive you to better AI-backed decisions. Claim your 7-day free trial. Go to sportsgamepodcast.com, Rhythm, sportsgamepodcast.com/RATHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the quarterfinal matches. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. Starting off with the lock, I think I am going to go to the Fritz match, and I am going to go with a first set and a full match play. I'm going to go for the double. I'm going to go with Fritz to win the first set and the match at -148 on FanDuel. Couple reasons why I'm going to go with this. First of all, I did like the other plays I mentioned for the actual matches. However, there was a serious line disparity between FanDuel and DraftKings in this market. DraftKings had this exact bet at -190, and FanDuel's hanging 148. Sure, I'll take the 42 cents, no questions asked, but I think Fritz is in a very good spot. He's looked very good in this event. Musetti, I think, is a guy that can get off to some slow starts. He's a solid player, but I have to once again mention his draw has been pretty favorable, and now he's against a borderline top 10 guy in the world. I think that Fritz is in a good spot to get the job done. I think his serve is going to give Musetti problems. I think Fritz's return game has been impressive, and it was very impressive for the last couple sets against Zverev. I think 148 is a good price. You're looking at a guy that's around -360 as a favorite. It's -190 on another book, so you're getting a great price shopping around. Fritz has won the first set in 7 of his last 8 matches, so he has been a very fast starter recently. And they face off in Wimbledon in 2022, and Fritz beat him in straight sets. I think Fritz is in a good spot here, and I think 148 is a pretty cheap number to take a -360 favorite to get him to win with a little bit of extra baggage attached to it. So for me, I'm going to use the actual money line price and to find a cheaper way to taking it. I am going to go with the Fritz to win the first set and the match at -148 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go with a parlay actually. For this one, I am going to parlay the over 3.5 sets in the Alcaraz match with Djokovic money line, and that pays out at +113. Alcaraz has lost at least 1 set in 2 straight matches. Paul's playing great tennis, won a 500 event, and he has been better as the event has gone on, beat Bublik in straight sets and beat Agut in straight sets. He's playing great tennis. And based on the head-to-head history, with them splitting the 4 meetings, 3 of the 4 meetings not ending in straight sets, I think that Alcaraz will drop a set. If he dropped the set to Humbert and to Tiafoe, I think Paul's definitely good enough to win at least 1 set here, and I think the price is pretty favorable. Now, I'm also going to parlay this with Djokovic money line because I mentioned it before. I think de Minaur is seriously injured, and with that being the case, we know most bets void when it comes to injuries for game totals and for spreads. However, most books do pay out money lines if 1 full set's complete. And I do think Djokovic, even if de Minaur does not retire, Djokovic can beat a compromised de Minaur in a 3 to 5 set match on grass. So I think Djokovic is kind of just, I don't want to say a free bet, but I think it's a pretty solid way to reduce juice on a couple of legs you actually like. Might be a very solid parlay piece in general, but I think Djokovic will beat de Minaur, especially if he's injured. And if Djokovic does end up advancing via retirement midway through the match, it would not shock me either. So give me Djokovic to get the job done. de Minaur's injury is too concerning for me, and Djokovic, after beating Rune, has answered every question that I had about his overall health and form. Give me Djokovic to win, and give me that in a parlay at plus money. So once again, my picks for the quarterfinals, my lock's going to be on Fritz to win the first set and the match at -148 on FanDuel, and my dog will be on Alcaraz over 3.5 sets, parlayed with Djokovic money line at +113. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. You can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. A reminder of the actual schedule: the men do have an extra day off compared to the women for the semifinals. So the next episode will be the women's semifinal matches. We're going to preview those. Then we'll do the men the day after. Until next time, though, find me on the NBA show, find me on the WNBA show, find me on the MLB show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.